Okay, so as promised, now that I am a few days post dental surgery, so I'm feeling a little bit better, I'm going through and giving you some information about your paper and realizing that it will be due very shortly. So I'm going to go through your Blackboard, so class is operational. I have your going through your profiles and grading them, and your first class lecture and essay one are here. The L at Purdue is where I expect you to find your resources, or in the APA manual. It doesn't matter which one you choose. So the bio photo assignment, I am in the middle of grading, but I haven't completed all of your grades yet. Basically, it's a sort of a doing technology, making sure that you're up to speed, and then in following what the assignment specs are as well. So essay 1 is due Monday the 20th. So see assignments, be sure to add a great deal of proof, which isn't necessarily quoting, but it also includes quoting. Really want to understand that you get the idea. We'll be doing voice board as soon as I can get that available for my computer and functional. I've been playing with it a little bit, so we're not quite there yet. It is Technology Week next week, so we'll be having some trainings and going through that. Have other people who've done it who show me quickly how to do it. So the audio-video elements will be adding a level of interest to the class. So when I go through and do your grading, what I see is I go through Grade Center, and what needs grading is all here. So I have your work, and that's how it appears to me. So know that when you go through and post your papers under the reader response theory, that it will also give me the same. So what I need from you is I need you to submit a Word document so that I can make comments on it. So it can't be an ODT paper. You need to save it as a Word document so that I can make comments on it. I can also make comments on PDFs, but PDFs are not as fluid or easy for you to change the comment to accept or reject, because it's a stable document. It's not going to let you accept the text or make changes to the text in the same way. I mean, there's some fluidity, but not really unless you have certain programs. So Word is a better option. So in reader response theory, you can use a reading that you've already done, a short reading. That would be fine. I gave you an option of you choosing the Hemingway poem along with Youth, kind of looking at, basically what does it mean, the death of the author. So this is written, important to know that it was first published in 1967. So it is talking more about how we read, who is speaking about her. So who's a woman, her sudden fears, her rational whims, her instinctive fears, her unprovoked bravado, her daring and her delicious delicacy of feeling. Who is speaking in this way? Is it the story's hero concerned to ignore the castrato concealed beneath the woman? Is it the man Balzac, endowed by his personal experience with the philosophy of woman? Is it the author Balzac professing a certain literary ideas of femininity? Or is it universal wisdom or romantic psychology? So we don't know. Literature is that neuter, that composite, that oblique into which every subject escapes the trap where all identity is lost, beginning with the very identity of that body who writes. So basically, we're reading something and we don't know exactly from where that sentence originates, who is speaking. And we can make assumptions, but it's really important to know that who is the person who's speaking, who is the person who is inferring meaning, and how do we accept that meaning and infer our own meaning on it, are all important to the reading. So basically what changed is that the author is a modern figure. We really respected the author. The author was this great god, like Baudelaire. Baudelaire's work was very well known. I studied Baudelaire in a poetry class at the University of Washington, and so basically it was all about the man. In certain authors, the lecture will switch to being very much about the person who's writing. Why? Because it adds an interest. I'm interested in Baudelaire because I know that he has this history. I'm interested in Hemingway because he has this history. I'm interested because he has this body of work that we look for these ideas in it. But does the work stand alone? So the author's empire is very powerful, but the question arose at this point in time as to whether this author God creates the writing or whether the absence of the author transforms a modern text. Basically, it's written so that in it, on every level, the author absents himself. Time, first of all, is no longer the same. The author, when we believe in him, is always conceived as the past of his own book, the before and an after. The author is supposed to feed the book. He pre-exists it, thinks, suffers, lives for it, maintains his work in the same relation of antecedents a father maintains with his child. So what we want to ask ourselves is, are we reading the author or are we reading the writing? Are we able to separate them from one another in order to get the meaning? So are we getting the message of the author God, or are we getting the message of the text? So that's the thing that we're really looking at here. So once the author is gone, the claim to decipher a text becomes quite useless. We can't hope to say that we know exactly what this means without having an author to give us that background. So what we want to do is we want to look at it in both ways. Basically, it's a distancing, so we're stepping back and distancing ourselves from the writer. But basically what was happening in this essay was a great deal more than that. It's the ultimate meaning. Basically, we want to take away the fact that there is an ultimate meaning. There isn't. So basically, we want to look at it and look at it in a way that the text stands alone, but not completely. So this is translated by Richard Howard. What we were looking at in The Death of the Author by Barthes is we're looking at the idea of reversing the myth, that the birth of the reader must be ransomed by the death of the author, instead of looking to understand the author, relate to the author, and then relate his readings to everything else. And the problem that we have when we do that, when we infer the author's ideas on everything, is that we're making this huge assumption that the author God, is completely in it, in the same way he has been from one piece to another, that he's not playing the devil's advocate, that he's not saying something with irony, that he's not doing something in someone else's style. We're basically saying that this is the author and we know the author, and we don't. So I think that that's a really important aspect of looking at reader response theory and why it became such an interest. So then when we look at Kiefer's article, of course, what Kiefer's article, you have to log in, so what Kiefer's article does is, it's written in 1995, which is also important, is it looks at whether we went too far. So did the idea of reader response theory, according to Barthes, did that go too far? So of course, Kiefer's looking at it in philosophy and literature as, yes, it went too far. Because we had this time and distance to look from 1967 to 1995, we're kind of stepping back and going, okay, so reports of the death of the author are exaggerated. The death of something sacred, all of this. When Nietzsche wrote the belated obituary on the death of God, he was very well of its enormity. He complains that millennia will pass before humanity will overcome its living in the intense, frightful shadow of God. So this whole idea that God died, the author died, and then we have this freedom, this ability to reinterpret or interpret without that, in the absence of that, is huge. It was huge at that point in time, and it still is huge. But what he's saying is that Barthes has become the sort of author that he sort of warned us about, is that he's the author God, and we sort of are relying too heavily on his word. So Barthes became a cornerstone of a new age of cultural production and consumption. We looked at things through his eyes. So there's a danger there too of looking too carefully. So the fun thing for somebody who has studied theory, as I have a bit, is looking at sentences like this within his text. So the paramount irony is that the four henchmen of the authorial apocalypse, Barthes, Foucault, Derrida, Paul de Man, when you get into knowing these critics, you will understand that they were also given godlike status of founding fathers of postmodernism. So what they wrote, they became hailed and completely worshipped by students everywhere, worshipped by literary scholars. And it was a big idea to kind of have somebody look at that and say, wait a minute. I've been in theory classes where if you spoke like Derrida, which at times was fairly meaningless, just focusing on minutia of what was being discussed and analyzing whether anything could be clearly defined at all. I mean, that just saying things along those lines would create a hero status in the speaker. So a student could get a pass on doing the reading based on the fact that nothing has meaning, which was hilarious and popular. And as long as you studied Derrida and how he spoke, you could sort of become Derrida-esque and talk about how nothing has meaning. And so now we're nearing 3 decades of postmortem of the author. So the author died 30 years ago. What changed? So the death of now, of course, it's considerably longer, but the death of the author has given birth not only to the reader, but a booming industry of discursive practices, or the production of texts on texts. And basically this didn't help the university to have a great deal of straight credit for becoming useful. Basically, we overanalyzed things almost to death, and feeling that we had to study and know all of these critics and what they were saying about writing, that you couldn't even say that writing had some meaning that you personally inferred without looking through criticism. So of course, that's not true either. Of course, you can have your own reading and you bring your own ideas, your cultural ideas, your reading history, and what you hold important into your reading as well. So Barthes provides a clue in his gloss on the text as a multidimensional space in which a variety of writings, none of them original, blend and clash. Elsewhere, he wrote, a text is a space where no language has a hold over any other, where languages circulate. Sorry, the text is a place where no language has any hold over any other, where languages circulate. So Barthesian reading is an open project of realizing what it means for a culture and its system of signs, language, to congeal into a certain select subsystem of signs. Interesting fact is Barthes refined this method already in analysis of sporting events, wrestling, everyday household products, soaps, and pasta that clearly were not the products of original authorial vision. So Barthes challenged the symbolic. He challenged what things meant. But I warn you to not fall too deeply into this linguistic rabbit hole and playing with language and removing meaning too much. So So even agreeing that language